Steamians, what's up? Dan at Starlight here with some Steemic game theory for you surrounding the issue of self-voting. Disclaimer, I'm not saying self-voting is good or bad. I'm not judging people's behavior. I'm just analyzing behavior and predicting future behavior within the incentive structure that Steemit provides. And this discussion assumes that all users are going to act in their own self-interest and with their best possible, with what they believe is their best possible strategy. Okay? So for starters, I'd like to break users into three different groups. Now, a lot of users will actually fall into, two or more of these groups at any specific time. But for simplification, we'll break them up into three different types of users. And we'll talk sort of about the quintessential actor within each of these categories. So the first group would be community members. The second group would be self-voters. And the third group would be what I like to call the stake police. Okay? They're people that use their stake, their Steam power to police the self-voters. So first of all, the community members are people that act in their own self-interest, right? This is the quintessential community member, acts in his own or her own self-interest to build a reputation in the community with the expectation that by doing that, they will receive financial and social rewards. Now, and they're incentivized to do that. Steemit incentivizes that. Now, Steemit also incentivizes self-voting, right? So a self-voter is just somebody who's interested in just sort of gaming the system, doesn't care about community, and just wants the most return on investment for the least possible effort, right? So the most efficient way to get more money. That's what they're looking at. Then you have the stake police, who are community members who believe that self-voters are damaging to the Steemit community and to the price of Steam, decided to go out of their way to use their stake, decided in their best interest to actually use their stake to counter self-voting by downvoting self-voters. Okay? So let's first of all look at the pros and cons of self-voting. So if you're a self-voter, the incentives are huge to self-vote because with Steemit, I mean, you put in a certain amount of money into Steam Power, and then every day you or your bot does a post with 9 comments and upvotes all of them. And within a year, as it compounds, you probably at least double your money. So I don't exactly know what the time frame is, but you probably double your money every year. And that's massive. Like, you can't really find return on investment like that. But there's also a cap to it, right? Is that you can't earn more than that, because the community members aren't going to be voting on your bullshit posts, right? So it's a great return on investment. It's pretty obvious how you get it, and there's a ceiling on it. You're going to double your money every year, but that's all. And then there's a cost, which is from as low as your bot doing those posts every day to as high as you having to stay one step ahead of the stake police, right? Because again, I'm not saying self-voting is wrong, but there will be a group of people that say self-voting is wrong to the point where they're going to use their stake to try to catch you and downvote you, right? So, and depending on how much stake is doing that and how smart that stake is, it may drive the costs up substantially, right? To the point where you might have to actually spend an hour or manually every day posting 10 to 12 comments that all actually engage in something to upvote each of those at slightly different percentages so that the bots don't catch on, because you figured out the bots look for only 100% votes or whatever it is, right? So the cost is going to be that you have to stay ahead of that, and that you're risking your reputation constantly to the point where you may have to move your funds to a new account, right? And start again. So that's sort of the plight of a self-voter. I mean, there's great reward. There's a lot of risk and potential cost, right? As the community evolves, right? Right now, there's a few people self-voting. Right now, the community is small, but as we grow into millions and millions of users, I mean, there's going to be a lot of users who just decide to try to game the system and, come up with strategic ways to self-vote under the radar, right? Okay. Now, let's look at community members, right? Community members don't have a ceiling to how much they can earn because they're trying to build reputation within a community. And they could potentially earn everybody in the community's vote. So it's not like they're only doubling their money anymore. So the upside is much greater for a community member. And you will also be receiving social rewards, right? People liking and engaging with your content and so on and so forth. The downside is the cost is way, way higher, especially initially, right? For a self-voter, I mean, they can be up and running just self-voting right away and making big return on investment. But if you're trying to get votes from the community, you're going to have to spend a lot of time engaging and creating content that people actually like. And you might not be good at that. So you may be good at it and you may earn way more than a self-voter could ever earn, but you may be bad at it and you might not ever be able to earn from the community as much as somebody could earn self-voting, right? And the only thing keeping you from self-voting might be because you believe that it's wrong, right? Or bad to do, right? Because it's not, it takes a certain sort of understanding and personality to act outside of the community guidelines, which are not written top down. These are the guidelines that the community evolves as everybody engages with each other strategically out of their own self-interests, right? So then you have the stake police. And like the thing is, if there was just one person self-voting every day, maybe nobody would care. But let's say you're somebody who is a quintessential community member who's not making a lot of money and you see people self-voting. Well, if there's nobody stopping the self-voting, then everyone's just going to start self-voting, right? But there seems to be this overriding understanding amongst the majority of users that the real value is going to be from the Steam community as the community grows. So there is a lot of incentive that if there's too many people self-voting, the bigger stakeholders in the community are going to be incentivized to try to preserve the community atmosphere by targeting and downvoting, like catching, these self-voters and making it not advantageous to self-vote or making it harder to, right? So driving the cost of self-voting up. So the stake police are very necessary in order to keep people feeling okay about about acting in the best interest of community, even though there might be outliers who aren't. And this is the thing, right? Like, I'm not trying to draw any major conclusions here. I'm just trying to lay out what the motivations are for each of these groups of users. And again, there's going to be a lot of crossover between these groups. I mean, you might be somebody who just upvotes your own posts, but mostly engages in the community. And the community is probably not going to have any issues with that at all. And probably shouldn't. But again, it will be up to the community to decide on that over time, organically, right? It's not going to be anybody saying what's right or wrong. It'll just be, how the system evolves, right? And, during the moment that you upvote your own post, you're in the self-voting category. And during the moment when you're engaging in the community, you're in the community category. And if that one time you decide to downvote somebody who you think's abusing the system, then for that moment you're part of the police stake, right? So a lot of people will be in all three of these categories at some point. But what we're interested in is what categories are ultimately we incentivizing everybody towards, right? And in my opinion, community is going to win out. And it's going to win out with the help of the stake police. But there will always be some self-voters who can stay ahead of the stake police and believe that it's in their best interest financially to try to game the system by self-voting. And that's going to be okay, right? The problem would be if everybody's self-voting, but the stake police will make sure that not everybody is. Only some people will. And are those people really hurting the system? Or are they just blog mining on their own, right? Without the help or interaction of the community, right? And there's a lot to be said for the fact that, they are still in their own way contributing to the security of the network, just not in nearly as beneficial way. But still, if you're a community member and at least you're not confronted with a whole bunch of people who are blatantly self-voting, then you can feel good about your choice to be a community member, even if you're not making as much as some of these outlying self-voters. So in summary, I think that that for the majority of people, for almost everybody, the best method is going to be to be a part of the community. And of course, you're going to upvote your own posts. That's great, but your main job is going to be to engage, and that's going to be what incentivizes your behavior and gives you the best return on your investment. Though there will always be some people who are just out to self-vote and game the system, who don't care about community, and that'll be okay as long as it's balanced with the appropriate amount of police stake. So anyways, I'm just laughing at sort of how ridiculous this is to me, but these are the thoughts that I was thinking about. And again, I'm not an expert on game theory, really. This is just sort of what I've gleaned from my basic understanding of it and applying it to the situation of self-voting. So take it for what it's worth. Hopefully it helps you understand where you fit into this matrix, right, of Steemit, and what your best options are, both long-term and short-term, and also to be in the minds of the other participants and understanding what's motivating them, and and how you can either counteract them in that game, or just let them be because you realize that to some extent they're not hurting things as much as maybe you might think they are. But again, none of this is for me to decide or say or espouse. I'm just sort of putting it all out there. I'm interested to hear your comments on this stuff. So hit me up in the comments. Dan at Starlight. Peace out.